Welcome to the Underbelly podcast, brought to you by Clarity Financial, as we peek underneath, poke around, and expose the unexposed stories of the week about finance, economics, politics, and life. I'm Brent, Clanton, executive producer of The Lance Roberts Show and The Real Investment Hour. We wanted to create a forum for exchanging stories, ideas, and anecdotes that deserve more in-depth, unfiltered conversations, plus allow you a glimpse behind the scenes. As always, we welcome your feedback. Find us on Facebook or online at realinvestmentadvice.com. Now, let's step inside the studio for the Underbelly podcast, starting now. And good afternoon. Welcome. I'm Brent Clanton, executive producer, and in the studio this afternoon, we've got Richard Rosso, Denton Florian, who's the producer of the Sam Houston movie, and Rusty Key, who operates the Game Preserve in the Woodlands with an interesting connection to history that we'll tell you about in just a moment. And a special guest via the telephone, Gary Foreman with Native Son Productions, is going to join us by remote control. But first off, we want to take a look at what's happening on Wall Street. Rich, what in the wide world of sports is going on out there?
Well, we had a nice turnaround today. We opened up negative, Dow down 53. Now we're up 58. S&P up 1 point. 10 heavy, NASDAQ still a little wishy-washy today. So we're starting to see a little bit of softness in tech, but still the leader. So let's just say it's bullish business as usual so far today.
And how much of this is an effect of the geopolitical scene that's going on with the Turkish economy and the Italian economy? And
well, that's creating more of the volatility that we've seen in the past week. I think the big news is maybe China coming to the table to discuss what, just going through the tariff issue. Maybe things are softening up just a little bit. Because if we remember, first of all, well, China does depend on us to buy stuff, obviously. Mm-hmm. But the other part of it is they were going to start their own infrastructure projects again, sort of reminiscent almost of what happened when we were trying to get out of the Great Recession. China was one of the first countries to come out there, the first entities to come out and actually create this huge infrastructure project. I still believe there are many cities that are vacant in that area. So they're trying to battle this process, but I think they're finally coming to the table. I think that's really the positive tone in the market, because anytime China starts to emerge as far as communication about tariffs, that's when we start to see more negativity in the market. Obviously, Tesla's having a rough day, down 8%. Elon Musk has lamented that this was a very excruciating year for him, and the worst is yet to come, whatever that means.
Does that mean he's going to continue to tweet?
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. When you're that smart, I guess you can have a breakdown for sure.
I guess.
But again, he uses these worst is yet to come, excruciating. He used words like this often, so I'm not sure how much relevance I'm providing. But obviously, the SEC investigation into the tweets possibly is the probe, is what's causing the 8% drop-off today. So, again, sort of a mixed bag, but tech definitely weak today, international weak today. But nice turnaround for the Dow. We'll see how it closes.
Yeah, while we're on the subject of money and economics, and Fannie Mae is now going to, and Freddie Mac are going to allow home loans with 3% down. Haven't we been here before?
This is just stupid. This is, again, if you have to put 3% down on a home, you cannot afford a home.
That's
you cannot
right.
afford a house, okay? So we're going to make some of the same mistakes we did before. We already had talked about on the radio show, on the Real Investment Hour, how 1 out of 3 millennials are tapping into retirement accounts for down payments. And so, again, 3%, 5% down. They want to target home buyers. And, again, if this is your issue and you can't come up with a down payment, maybe you need to be more fiscally disciplined. So, again, I think it's a big mistake. But they are announcing, again, new products. I guess after 10 years or so, you sort of forget.
And Denton, if you want to jump in here, I can see you like chomping at the bit to chime in, so go right ahead.
I agree. If you can't afford to buy a house, don't buy a house. I mean, that leads to all sorts of other difficult problems.
Absolutely
with respect to maintenance and everything else. Owning a house is kind of a maintenance, an ongoing maintenance exercise.
For a lot of people, it's a maintenance nightmare.
Yeah.
Not only that, they're looking at qualified applicants can have a FICO score as low as 620. And again, we have seen an increase in FICO scores. I'm writing about this for the Real Investment Advice blog based on some changes based on a consortium of the credit reporting agencies trying to remove medical collections and different cleaning up credit scores. So we're seeing the lowest scores actually increase by about 40 points. So it's significant.
Yeah.
So
I did hear, and I didn't write down the source, but I did hear that homeowners who were able to get a loan with a lower credit score surprisingly had a lower incidence of delinquent payments than would have been expected of someone with that low credit score. So at least to their benefit, to their credit, no pun intended, if they get a house, they're making sure they make the payments on it.
Well, right now you have lack of inventory, you have shortage of workers, you have an increase in the rising cost of raw materials. You're at the peak of prices across the country. So you're going to go ahead when market's white hot, put 3% down, probably be underwater in your home within 2 years. And then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Maybe that's because of what you just cited is the fact that housing prices have consistently gone higher. When they go the other way and I only have a 3% interest in this thing and I'm underwater, what do I do then?
Walk.
I don't know. So that's
what happened the last time around. You got jingle mail.
So we have to see. But our discipline here, Clarity, is your mortgage shouldn't be more than 2 times your gross income. If you can't do it, you got to wait. And guess what? This is a good time to wait. It's a good time to wait.
That's right.
Put your dollars aside. So, again, we'll see what kind of disturbing conclusions come from this, but we are on the same track we were before the Great Recession.
Long ago. All right, let's jump to the next topic if we can. And Denton's in the studio for a completely different reason, and that's perfectly okay. There has been afoot an issue with the NFL, with the Anthem thing. And a lot of people have tried to figure out a way to solve that, assuage the pain, whatever it takes.
I know people have just decided that they're not going to watch it.
Yeah.
And
But
they're very happy not to.
Greater minds have tried to put some things together, and Denton is one of them, I
Excellent.
think. So I'm going to let you introduce your guest that you bring in and how he's connected, and just lay out your premise, because I think it's brilliant.
It is.
Well, thanks for having me, Brent. It's good to see you
bet.
again.
Yeah.
Good to be here again. And I'm with my friend Rusty Key, who is a descendant of Francis Scott Key, who wrote the national anthem.
What would Francis Scott Key think about all this now?
He would not be happy.
I think not.
It's a shame that I think this issue has kind of gone off the rails the way it has, because most Americans have no understanding of what event the Star-Spangled Banner is connected to. They don't know anything about Fort McHenry. They don't know about the invasion, who defended it or who attacked it or anything else. And so
most people don't even know what a Fort McHenry is or was.
Or where it was or anything. So we have a lot of education that needs to take place, and we ought to learn about it. And I think if we learned about it, it would bring a great deal of clarity to this whole issue. And my friend Gary Foreman, who is with us, and you may introduce him, he has done an awful lot of work at Fort McHenry and on this issue. And we were all talking about it, and came up with an idea that, we're all football fans, and a lot of people are football fans, even the people that are very angry right now. But I think there's something that we could do that would bring a lot of people back to the NFL and would help position the NFL in a positive place to educate people about our own country.
So, Gary, maybe at this point it's a good time to bring you in. What's cooking up there?
Well, this is a very interesting perfect storm, if you will, of elements coming together. It so happens that in the previous decade, I produced with a very strong Texas team of producers and creative folks. We produced the first ever documentary on this subject, on the War of 1812 and the invasion in the Chesapeake, which resulted in not only the bombardment of Fort McHenry in Baltimore, but also the complete takeover of Washington by the British troops and Navy, and the sacking and burning of most of the town, and especially the White House. So most people do not connect, as Denton said very accurately. They do not understand the connection of the event associated with the words that they are singing. So basically, the audience, for the most part, is blindfolded when they sing this most popular, the most performed song ever in the history of our country. So we have a blindfolded audience or populace that cannot understand what Francis Scott Key was writing about. And you brought up a good point. If Francis Scott Key was alive today, what would he say? Well, I think he would say, well, not only do you have me all wrong, you've got this whole period wrong. You don't really understand what I was writing about.
Yeah.
And that's what we would like to straighten out with a very, very interesting idea. And if you're ready to hear it, I'm ready to tell you.
All right, I'm going to reconnect our connection. We did it. We connected before the podcast started. Gary sounded great. It never fails. You bring him on for the live show, and the telephone fouls up. So if you'll pick up the narrative from there,
well,
I'm going to reconnect with
sure.
Gary.
I think one thing to understand is that liberty is not the history of mankind. Tyranny and oppression and despotism is the history of mankind. And we happen to be lucky enough to live in this little blip of history and in this special place where a different system of government was devised by some very smart people who founded our country. And slavery, if you go back far enough, every single person listening to this podcast is a descendant of slaves, all of them. And it was on every continent. It was on every civilization, every race, and our founders. There's been a lot of criticism of Francis Scott Key because he owned slaves, and I've got to ask: did the people back then in the 1800s have different views on race than we do? Yes, all of them did. Mm-hmm. The abolitionists wrote things that you couldn't print in any modern newspaper, but it's not like they were either abolitionists or they were pro-slavery. There was this great middle ground, and people were born into this period, and they had to figure out how to deal with it. You play the hand you're dealt, and they knew it was wrong. They knew it was evil, and yet here it is. And so how are we going to deal with it? And so, again, liberty was a very rare thing, but you had black soldiers in uniform defending Fort McHenry. Gary can probably talk about that much more eloquently than I can. But you had, on both sides, you had blacks from Jamaica fighting with the British, and you had blacks in U.S. uniform defending Fort McHenry. And Francis Scott Key was watching it, and it's a beautiful story. I mean, the words kind of blow right by us because we know them so well, and we sing them by rote. And
we think we know them so well, but actually we're only singing about a quarter of the song.
That's
right.
Well, that's right. There are 4 verses to the whole song, but if you try to get the music out of your head and you just look at the words, and he's saying, "Hey, can you see it? Is it still there? This thing that we were looking at last night."
What's amazing is the lyrics themselves stand alone
Yes.
without music.
Yeah.
You do not need music to see how beautiful this is, and you can't imagine what he must have saw and how he internalized to create these words. That's how powerful
and
they
he's
are.
watching it get dark, and as it gets dark, he can't see the flag anymore, and he's wondering if it's still there. And then the explosions and the bombs are going off, and the rocket's red glare, and it kind of lights up the whole sky. And for a moment, he can see if the flag is still there or not. And so the battle is over, and it's dark, and here comes the dawn. Here comes the dawn's early light, and he's asking, "Can you still see it? Is it still there? That thing that we were so proud of last night?" Is it still waving?
And I always took it as is America still there? Like when I've always read or listened to the song, to me it always meant the flag was the symbol for, is the country still going to stand the way it was? What's going to change? That was always, I think, the meaning to me behind the song.
And it wasn't clear that the country was still going to stand.
That's
Back
right.
at that time in 1814, the country was brand new, and it was by no means clear that this deal was going to make it.
America was still considered an experiment at this point, right?
Absolutely.
I think people think in 1776 was sort of over and everything was hunky-dory. And I don't realize what trials and what happened, because the attacks, I can't even imagine what kind of attacks there had to be on that change of mindset, that the odds of us actually making it out to where we are today were beyond slim.
Well, they
I can't
burned
even
Washington during this conflict.
Yep.
They burned the Capitol.
You know, one thing I'd like to point out is you talked about how he was writing this for, the song and the lyric. It wasn't a song. It was just his outpouring of emotion that turned into this poem. Now, he only wrote the first lyric while he was on the ship watching all this happen. And then when he got back to his office and he had a chance to sit down and think about the rest of what he's talking about here, and as you look through the other verses, he's really strongly talking about how the people are standing up. And it's about the defenders. It was originally entitled "The Defense of Fort McHenry."
Right.
It was about the defenders. It was about the people that were fighting for them, the home of the free, land of the. I mean, that's who he's talking about here. It's not. He didn't see this as a national anthem. That's what it's going to be. He was saying, look at these people. Look at what they're doing, and look how our country as a people is standing up.
Yeah, he wrote it for the veterans.
Well,
Yeah,
that's how each stanza ends. Or
Absolutely.
the land of the free and the home of the brave. That
Absolutely.
phrase is repeated all four times.
Yeah. So and a reason I wanted to bring this up is I've seen several comments lately made about, it's not about us not liking the veterans. It's not about it's against the military and all of this. This song is about the military. It's about the people. It's about the people that stood up. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's about
It
the
is.
resolve of
If
those
you-
people to still stand
Exactly.
and fight. That's
Exactly.
amazing. I mean, I don't know. Always chokes me up.
So
And-
I want to bring Gary back in
Yep.
since we've got a good connection. Gary, what have you done graphically to portray all of this? How is this all ramping out?
Well, within the last 10, 15 years, I've actually been involved in 3 productions, national broadcasts, and 1 IMAX film on this subject. And in fact, I was the first American producer-director to actually push for getting this on national television. That was, of course, with the History Channel, and the entire 2-hour special was produced right here in Texas. And but even getting this on the air was tough. I was turned down 4 years in a row to bring this up, and I think what was discussed earlier is correct, is that 1776, of course, the American Revolution, was the idea. But Americans still looked over their shoulders at Europe to be guided, and so we were still struggling. But when we produced this show, it was a game changer for the millions that actually saw it on air, and that was that they finally were connecting this incredible growth or energy of American spirit to cast their destiny here. And so we changed completely right after the war. I mean, we finally got our feet on the ground, and we decided, this American experiment is going to work. We don't need a king and a queen, a monarchy to move forward. So what's been discussed over the years is that what's been missing out of this story, besides people understanding it, is that there's never been a music video of what Francis Scott Key was writing about. I mean, we've had flyovers and we've had the flag waving on jumbotrons, but that's not the story. The story is exactly what was just been discussed in the last 5 minutes, and that it's very dramatic. It is a sound and light extravaganza. I mean, you've got thousands of bombs, missiles, and rockets, day and night on bombarding the fort, but also during the middle of the night, in a tremendous thunderstorm erupted across the entire sky for hours. And so you had this incredible barrage on Baltimore and Fort McHenry taking place. The place shook as though they were experiencing an earthquake. And people talked about they had never, ever seen anything like this before. And the British were doing something that had not been seen for about 400 years or so, and that is the firing of these what was called Congreve rockets, which left a prominent arching red glare throughout the sky and before they exploded. And that's what Key is referring to in the rocket's red glare here. So this was part of the emotional spectacle that Key was witnessing as he was detained by the British bomb fleet. In fact, we're finding out, he was not that far away from the scene. He was actually just behind the bomb fleet, according to the latest British naval records that were secured. We now know that he could see the fort from 2 miles away. Now, what he was looking at and hoping to see by dawn's early light was one of 2 flags were flying over the fort, but the one he was looking for was 32 feet by 40 feet in dimension, which was one of the largest flags on the globe at that time. And when it caught that first gleam of light, and the British had stopped firing, and the British weren't going to tell Francis Scott Key that what was really going on. He had to wait, and when he saw that flag catching that light, it changed everything.
Not only for ecstatic.
Him. Yeah, he was beyond belief on it. Because look, at this time we are fighting the greatest military might on the planet. That's Great Britain. They had all the troops, they had all the navy, they owned the seas. And they had just defeated Napoleon. And now they were going to concentrate and pound us into dust. That was the mission.
And I think you got to say also, go back just one step to say this was a very different form of government than the world had ever seen. In the old model, what these guys were used to is you got your rights from the king. And if the king is the source of your rights, then by God, the king can take them away. And Jefferson said no. You read the Declaration that our rights, we are endowed by our Creator. Our rights come from God, and the legitimate purpose of government is to secure those rights, not grant them. And the government has no legitimate right to take those rights away, and we can govern ourselves. Reasonable people can, man is sufficiently endowed to govern himself. We don't need a monarch. We don't need a king. That is a very different model than the divine right of kings. And in this battle, the whole question was, is that idea going to make it or not? Is liberty
in fact,
is liberty going to make it or not? And
absolutely. In fact, a couple things about the verses that he wrote, and absolutely correct that the first one was written on the sides or the railing of watching this thing on the ship. The other 3 were written as he left and went back into Baltimore, and by the next day, this was a broadside, but for people to read, and it gained tremendous following. But the last verse is kind of interesting because the third to the last line he wrote, "In God is our trust." This is where our motto comes from.
Yeah.
And so Denton's absolutely correct on this. This was a whole different way of thinking. And it took a while for even the Americans to get it right, because they were just used to this habitual thinking of how their families had endured, coming across from the pond, from Europe and so forth. So this whole American experiment was under a severe test, and this is why Key is emphatically stating the case that we have a chance now to survive all of this.
Well, and some would say that America is once again under a test with all of the disputes and protests and questioning, and you've got these groups like Antifa out there creating all kinds of havoc and whatnot. I think what we've seen with this whole national anthem fiasco with the NFL is a symptom of a deeper problem, you know?
Yes.
And so you guys decided, let's put this on film. Let's create this large-scale presentation. What do you think you could do with that?
You know, we're a very visual society today, and you almost, I mean, you whether you like it or not, it's the truth. You have to see it.
Yeah.
And this story has never been seen on large scale. You know, the idea, and again, like Gary talked about this some, but the idea was we could put together a visual depiction of the national anthem. We think it could be shown during an NFL game. They've already dedicated the time. We already sing the national anthem. They already have the jumbotrons. You know, it's not like they would have to lay out any additional equipment or dedicate time that they haven't already dedicated. And I think it would go a long way toward visually showing people what they're singing about.
And I think the significance of Gary's involvement, this isn't his first rodeo.
No.
In large format art. You want to tell his story? Or you want to brag on him? You want Gary to brag on himself?
Oh, I'll let Denton do the first part. I'll try to clean it up.
Because it's a cool story.
Well, you know, listen, Gary is a professional producer. He's got long experience in this period of history, not just with film, but with reenactment in this period of history. Those of your listeners who have driven down to San Jacinto and you've seen the big murals on the side of the petrochemical tanks down there.
Yes.
Gary's the one who put those murals on the side of those tanks down there. And, you know, he's a very learned person about this period of history, and it's important that we get it right. It's important that we not Hollywood this kind of thing up, but that we show, you know, warts and all. I mean, history ought to be taught the way it was, not the way we wish it was. And so this is a great way to do that.
Well, it was one thing I would add to it is that I think, in fact, I got a call from the president of the Green Bay Packers discussing this, because we've been talking to a number of clubs about this possibility, and he was intrigued. And I said, I said, Mark, when you look at what you see when this pops up on the screen, I said, you're actually going to see black soldiers in uniform fighting on the ramparts and in the shore batteries and the entrenchments. And he was shocked at that. He says, "My God, he says, I had no idea." He said, "We don't," and he said, "We just don't know this story." And I said, "This is the reason why we need to present it. We're couching this in a much bigger envelope, if you will. We're proposing that we call this whole program the Home of the Brave, and we're proposing that we put together an entire package, which would consist of short stories, but also the verses, verses one done several different ways, verses 1 and 2, and all 4 verses. But we're looking at about an hour's running time of programming or video presentation that the Americans could purchase, and the proceeds would go to veteran services. We've got 50,000 homeless vets. We have a lot of other issues that are just an abyss that we have to fill.
And the song was about the veterans. The song was written for the veterans. It was written for the defenders of Fort McHenry. And, I would say it is wrong to protest this song, because the country was founded for liberty and justice for everybody. Now, I'm sorry they couldn't wave a magic wand at the time and sprinkle pixie dust on something and make all the injustice go away in one fell swoop, but they couldn't, and we can't either. But they created a system that could be perfected over time, that could, as they called it, be a more perfect union. And we have been. We've come a long way in 200 years. We've come a long way in 50 years. And so let's not attack this and protest the system whose goal is justice for all. If there's injustice, then let's focus on the injustice. If there's a wrong out there, then let's right that wrong. Let's all stand shoulder to shoulder against that injustice, but not against the Star-Spangled Banner, which is the system that makes it possible to end slavery, that makes it possible for, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, for black children and white children to walk hand in hand together and be friends and be educated together and so on. I just think it's misplaced, and we could go a long way and probably bring a lot of football fans back. And I think it's something everybody could rally around and agree on. And we certainly need some unity these days.
Let me insert about how people feel about the national anthem today, since the protests have really picked up a lot of steam. People are now starting to feel like they don't want to be present when the song is played because it just conjures up all sorts of negativity. And it's a shame that we get to this point where we don't want to be around our own traditions, our own rituals about our country anymore because someone's going to get angry or looking to be offended. We believe strongly that if we shine the light on this topic, this will turn around a lot of opportunities for the NFL, for our citizens to feel good about this story, because they never saw the story before. And when they see it, how it comes to the way it was, cinematically, authentically capturing exactly what Francis Scott Key was seeing, which was a spectacular, unbelievable scene here. People are going to be inspired by this. And we know that from our earlier experience, not only with the IMAX film that we recently did, but also with our History Channel show, which was a huge success. Had huge ratings, and we were able to even get our first Primetime Emmy nomination off of this program. So we know it works. We know that people embrace it when they see it.
History is about, the best way to teach history is to tell stories. History is about stories. And if you want to capture people, tell them the story. Tell them a story, and they'll get it. And they'll be excited about it. And again, I think it's something that builds unity for us.
So have you approached the NFL officially about providing portions of this 1 hour presentation, I guess, for presentation before a game? Is that the plan?
Yes, we are. We've got several avenues to our approach to the NFL. We feel like right now we are about one person away from coming from different directions with them. It's a big operation, and to crack that nut, it takes a lot of special contacts to make that happen. And we feel we're getting closer. We didn't just start this yesterday. We've been working at this for some time. But we feel that this is certainly an out-of-the-box idea, but it's going to take an out-of-the-box concept like this to turn things around. You can't fix things with the things that you've always had that made it worse. So we feel we offer, and with proven results from the past, that shining light on this subject will make all the difference.
Richard, you've got a comment written all over your face.
I'm just not hopeful.
Why is that?
Because we just seem to be on a mission to want to erase history. Okay, we just seem to be on this trek, and the NFL seems to. I mean, I think this is going to. I think it would be incredible, but I just don't know how it would be received. Would it be received positive, or would it just make the cry against this incredible piece worse? Oh, look, now we're watching black soldiers actually getting killed now, the visualization of that and the blood. I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate here,
Sure,
Gary.
sure.
I'm all for what you're doing, 100,000% for what you're doing. I think it's very honorable, and I'm not. I just see the vitriol that would rise. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe we need to have that. I'm just not hopeful the NFL. I just don't think the NFL is going to have the guts or the fortitude,
the spine,
to do this. The spine.
Yeah.
Well, they've lost $1.4 billion last year.
I know.
That's not their revenue loss this year. That's not the damage to their brand.
Do they even? To your point, I mean, do they care about that? I mean, you think they would? That there's a message being sent.
I think their fans will embrace it.
I think so too. I think a lot of the fans
will it be
would.
embraced by who? Will it be embraced by Antifa? No. Will it be embraced by a lot of the low information voters? No.
But we all know the small voice tends to make the loudest impact on this stuff, and that's what I worry about. Because who cares what the masses think? So, what do you think, Gary? I don't mean to be pessimistic about it.
And that was very appropriate what you brought up, and we certainly have played that out in our own minds. But here's our experience: once you shine light on a subject, you can't be responsible for how people process thoughts in their minds.
Right.
If you do it responsibly, authentically, and accurately, which we do,
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden, if people still have a problem with it, they have to own the problem. It's no longer our problem, and that's what the kind of language we have to deal with here.
Yeah.
If we don't do anything, then we're complicit.
Yes.
And so knowing this subject so well, and having been to Fort McHenry so many times, it's just an incredible place. By the way, in Baltimore, it guards the harbor to come into Baltimore from the Chesapeake. But what's interesting about this place, from a national park standpoint, it's not only a national military park, it has a dual honor, and that is our national shrine. So it runs two parallel titles together that no other park has.
Well, as Denton said, the goal here is to show history as it happened, not as we would like for it to have happened.
No,
Exactly.
it's the light of the truth,
Yes.
and it's either going to empower or add light to it. It's either going to stick to Francis Scott Key's vision and actually augment it, right? It's going to, so I think the story definitely needs to be
And
told.
I'd like to say that Fort McHenry is 100% behind us. They're
Oh,
excited
yeah,
about it.
absolutely.
They are, Gary can tell us what they said. I mean, he's talked to them, but
Yeah.
they basically said they'll clear the decks. And, they've been wrestling with how do we get this out? I mean, these people have it all wrong. They literally don't know what they don't know. And it's a great story, but how do we get it in front of people?
Do they play this? Do they play the film at the fort, at the tours? Do they?
Well, they play a number of films there, but since we have filmed there so many times, we're in direct connection with them, and what Denton said is absolutely accurate. Is that they have been very frustrated by the spin that's been taken on this story, and it's out of control. And the only way you bring it back is you put it on the screen for people to see. You don't just talk about it. You put it out there so they can see it. And Denton again was correct that this is how you learn history. And so we're very excited because we do have the track record. We know how the audiences respond when they see the story come to life, and that's our assignment here. We have to find a way to make that happen. And so we're doing everything we can at this moment to find our best way into the headquarters of the NFL. A number of clubs know we're heading in this direction. Timing-wise, it's a little tough because, as you know, everybody's buried into the preseason, getting ready for the regular season. So there's it's a circus right now, but we want to get in there and make this work. We already know what it's going to feel like. We already know how the audience basically will respond, and that's what's driving this for us.
Well, as any good NFL coach would agree, if the game's not going real well in the first quarter, you change strategies. I would like to think that the NFL is not above making a course correction here in the preseason or in the first several weeks of the regular season if they deem this to be worthy, which, frankly, I don't see how they couldn't.
It's a great opportunity for them.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rusty.
I've got a question here, Gary and Amy. So what we're talking about here is what I'm going to term as the kneelers, the folks that are kneeling and what we see as the disrespect for the flag, for the veterans and things. And they say, well, it's not about that. It's not. In your plan about bringing this forward, this process forward, do you have a process in which you can go to the players as a whole in each organization, show them this film to kind of educate them? Because we get it, and I think a lot of the American public would get it and understand and see it and go, wow, that's really great. I understand the anthem. But if the kneelers don't get it, if they don't see their mistake in what they're doing, they're still going to kneel. They're still, and they have the right to protest. I'm very strongly for that. I have a good buddy of mine that was an ex-Marine, and we were talking the other day, and I says, is that insulting to you? And he goes, he's got a right to do it. He's got a right to do it. He's got the privilege to enjoy all the repercussions from that. But he has a right to do that if he wants to do that. And they do. So they will still try to do that. But do we have a process, something that we can help educate them to begin with?
Absolutely. And that's what this is hour-long presentation, overall hour-long presentation would be available, again, and the proceeds going back to the veterans. But let me explain this a little bit. Here's our analogy of how we deal with the kneelers. Let's say you have a problem in your house. It's a plumbing problem in your house, and you know where it's located. The plumbing problem is in the back, in the bathroom next to the master bedroom. But instead of going there, you go to the kitchen to fix it. In other words, it's the wrong venue.
Yeah, and I agree that. Yeah.
I mean, it's really the wrong venue, and the only reason people choose that is because the cameras are rolling. The cameras are there to capture it.
Yeah, and they knew it would be an emotional effect.
Right, but it's the wrong venue, and it's obviously the wrong venue because the agreement's not there, and it's backfiring, and people are losing money.
Well, I go back. It's a great opportunity for the NFL to recapture some of the people that have gone away. Some of them are never coming back, and you can't worry about them because that's sunk cost. They're gone. But a great percentage, I think, of those people could be brought back, and it's a winner for the NFL.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a winner for everybody if they'll but allow it.
Yep.
Good stuff. Well, we're almost out of time here for the podcast. I thought maybe it would be appropriate to roll this.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the
Kind of get teared up just hearing the first few strains of that song, don't you?
Beautiful.
Really is. Hey, there's one other history event coming up this weekend that I wanted to be able to mention before we sign off here. You've got the Sam Houston movie showing this weekend.
Well, hey, thanks for bringing that up.
Talk about that.
Our documentary on Sam Houston is playing on Houston PBS on Sunday starting at 12:30, yeah. Sponsored by Spirit of Texas Bank.
That is a great production, too. It really, really is well done.
And, Sam actually hired Francis Scott Key one time to defend him when he was
did?
placed on trial. And he beat this guy up who basically accused him of some corruption. And Sam caught him out on the street and just beat the living daylights out of him. And he was placed on trial in the House of Representatives. And he hired Francis Scott Key to defend him.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of history back there. But I was talking earlier, we were talking about how the confusion we have and back then and how they were discussing. 2 generations behind Francis Scott Key is a Key that fought on the Loyalist side during the Revolution.
Really?
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, they had conflicts and they had struggles within their own family. Which way you go? And you want to pick the side that's going to win. So,
Well, of course.
maybe he picked the wrong side.
Apparently.
Apparently so.
As history has proven. So when's it play again this weekend?
12:30 from 12:30 to 3 on
At Central Time.
Central Time on Houston PBS.
Okay, Channel 8. I have no idea. I think it's 8 on the cable systems, too.
I don't know off the top of my head. I believe so. Yeah,
You'd have to have a complete roster of all the cable stuff.
Right,
I think that's when it plays. Well, Denton, we appreciate you being on with us this morning, actually into the afternoon, and we're going to begin to wrap things up here as we close down. Rusty, thank you very much. I understand you have a arcade emporium up in the Woodlands.
We do. Guys, we're actually having a big benefit next week for Project Pinball in the Children's Hospital here in Houston.
Excellent.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you all for watching us this afternoon. On behalf of Richard Rosso, Denton, Florian, and Rusty Key, and Gary Foreman on the phone, I'm Brent, Clanton, executive producer. You can watch this a little bit later on YouTube. You can find the link on realinvestmentadvice.com. Have a good weekend.